Okay, officially, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I'm Luna. I'm the program manager for Echo's Design Leadership Program. Here today with Megan, Mike, and Taylor to talk about design and communication. I'm quite excited. Megan and I have been collaborating together since 2017, I guess. So it has been 5 years, I know. I'm quite excited. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. I would like to start by presenting our new video about the Echo's Design Leadership Program, and I would love to hear your insights after that. So just bear with me while I try to share my screen.
Design is leadership.
In recent years, we've begun to see that the most successful organizations are the ones that infuse their business with design at the core.
In our 12-week program, you will hear from and interact with some of the world's most highly regarded design and innovation leaders from across the globe. Our exclusive masterclass sessions will give you insights into how design leaders think and act in order to elevate design in their own organizations to deliver exceptional outcomes.
You will participate in more hands-on workshops with design leaders from your region, in which you will deep dive into some of the theory and practical activities behind the masterclass topics.
The Design Leadership Program is for those who want to learn how to manage and grow their team, develop their design vision, act as an advocate and catalyst for design within their organization, and generally navigate the challenging yet rewarding world of design leadership. We know that the realm of design is constantly evolving.
Our biggest goal is to help you develop the skills needed to become a great design leader who can continue to navigate the ever-changing world of business and society over the next decade.
We hope to see you in Season 2 of the Design Leadership Program.
Okay, I hope you guys liked it. I've been asking people to please share some insights about the movie with us. We are constantly iterating, so I would love to know about your perspective on what we're doing. So now just give me a second. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. So now sharing the slides that will be guiding us today. I'm happy to be here today again with Megan, Mayer, Taylor, and Mike Pattinson. We will be talking about design and communication. I would like to know where everybody's from. Christina just said she's from Brazil. I'm here in California. I know Megan is in New York. Taylor said he's in Boston. Mike is in Florida. So please let us know where you guys are joining us from. I'm always curious. We have an audience, global audience, especially because Design Leadership is our first global program. So it's interesting to see who we're reaching and how far we are reaching. Echoes, for those who don't know us, we've been in the market for the past 11 years. We are an independent global innovation lab driven by design. We have 3 business models, and the one that is hosting us today is Echo's Design Thinking School. We have a bunch of different courses. The one that is hosting us today is Echo's Design Leadership Program. We're helping business create value and innovation for good, and helping people and organizations master the innovation mindset and skills and tools. We're a global team. I'm in the United States, but we have a big team in Brazil, a big team in Australia, and we're growing in Portugal and Italy as well. Over the past 11 years, we graduated over 7,000 people remotely and over 40,000 people in person when we still had our studios in Rio, São Paulo, and Sydney. We are part of the Global Design Thinking Alliance. We are the only independent lab among all these universities and museums around the world conducting research on design. So it's quite an honor for us to be participating in design researches and at this moment conducting research on design leadership globally. And about season 2, we start in 8 days or 7 days actually. And this is a journey of 12 weeks where we're going through this whole program here. The journey you'll be able to find on our syllabus or on the website. And this is an unfold from those 4 pillars of how we see design leadership, which comes from you and yourself. So you need to understand who you are in order for you to then be able to share your skills and abilities with your team. And then, of course, if you're leading a team, you're talking to people individually. So it's a lot about the way that you deliver your communication. It's a lot about how you receive communication, your abilities to deep listen in order for you to, with your team, be able to create high value products and services. And because everything that we design, we're definitely designing for a system, we need to understand systems thinking, therefore impacting for greater good. This is the lineup for season 2. Every season we have a different lineup because our main goal is to bring different perspectives to understand what design and leadership is. That's the reason why we are conducting the Firesessions today with Megan and Taylor. There's a little bit about the structure of the course. I don't want to go into depth with that today, but if you guys want to have a conversation next week, I still have some slots available. Today is Friday, so let's just have fun with Megan and Taylor tonight. And I will leave the conversation for Mike to guide us. The stage is yours. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Luna. A little bit brief about me. I got into design a while back and have loved the eco space, and I'm now an ambassador for them as far as they move around the world. So what I'd first really like to do is to kind of get a little bit of intro and get a little bit of background about our panelists so that way we can see where they're coming from. So if you guys can give a little bit of an introduction about yourselves and then what you do in the design space, that would be helpful. So Megan, can we start with you?
Sure, great. Well, wonderful to be here, and I'm really excited about today's conversation. I'm talking to you from New York City with my Australian accent. I started my career in design as a graphic designer, and I then evolved into that particular discipline into application in advertising. So I worked as an art director in advertising agencies, which took my graphic design, which was very much in still form, into a very highly multi-medium visual and communication form. I found it really interesting because my design was all about connecting with people and working with different brands and different target audiences all around the world. And speaking to you today from New York City, I run a design arts company, whereby it's a two-pronged approach with the different industries. One is commercial, working with advertising agencies, brands, doing partnerships and brand collaborations. And our form of design and communication is everything from, it could be a print campaign, animation for social media, right through to a billboard. Our clients are very different from lifestyle, fashion, arts and entertainment. And then on my other side of my business, I work purely in finance, and that is bringing art experiences into museums and galleries and cultural institutions. So it's a full 360 of design, art, and communication. And that's probably a bit of a wrap from me. I'll pass it on to Taylor.
All right, can everybody hear me? Excellent. So hello everyone, my name is Taylor Cohn. My kind of background and experience in design, I started out on the different side of design in mechanical engineering, and then just sort of fell in love with the more I was exposed to and learned about design, and specifically design thinking, the design thinking process, the innovation process. I just fell in love with it and slowly kept moving my way closer and closer to this side of things. And over my career, I have had a couple mechanical engineering jobs, but I also fell in love with design and design thinking, which got me really specifically, as I said, innovation process is really my passion around around the people and teams that make it happen, and that actually bring these whether it's designs, product designs, service designs, experience designs to life. I spent some time teaching at the Stanford Design School, where I actually went to school and where I fell in love with design thinking. And that was, again, where design thinking really spoke to me. And specifically, it was a process for product design, designing human-centered products and services. But for me specifically, it was, I really saw it as a tool to kind of disarm the dysfunctions that can happen in collaboration. And so I really saw design thinking as a tool for better collaboration. And that's really where my career has brought me, as kind of an experienced designer for workshops and design sprints. And essentially, anytime people come together, how do we design those experiences with intention to maximize the value of time when people come together and when we gather to do meaningful things together. And now I'm at a product development firm called Delve, running our innovation experience practice, as I said, specifically around designing and delivering workshops and sprints, and anytime people come together doing great work.
Well, thank you for that. I really feel like we have a really diverse thought tank here with regards to like visual and communication. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And so as we frame up the intersection between design and communication, let's take a step back to like the beginning. And so I'm curious, like, what do you wish that you knew when you first entered this space of design and communication that would have been really helpful to know? Megan?
Well, I can just make a starter on this one. I mean, for me, you know, before I got into graphic design and design and communication, I was always curious about my own personal interaction and connection with what was around me, you know, from the street signs, typography, and how it connected to me right through to walking the aisles of a supermarket and falling in love with rice bubbles packaging and seeing characters on there. You know, there's so much design around us that I took it from the curiosity point of view and how art, which is my passion and interest, and design can actually come together and form a form of commercial design and application that then is applied throughout our environment. What I really wanted to understand when I first entered the space, and that is that I was just more about out of a curiosity as to how I could apply my design skills into graphic design. It's far more strategic, requiring you to have a specific design brief so you understand what are you designing and for who, being the target market. What is it you're trying to communicate? So there's a lot of codes of language which is built into this. As a graphic designer, I was really taught from an aesthetic point of view. What was missing, I believe, in my very first form of education is that the psychology of design and how that can have an impact on you. There's certain colors or there are certain words or graphics that will create a form of communication. And as understanding, I guess, those classic rules of design as opposed to simply creating something that was, I guess, aesthetically appealing. And that's at the very, very first beginning of my understanding of this and my formal education. So I would like to have known that there's a form of graphic design and commercial design, and I would have loved to have had psychology played into that and human interaction of the interface of design and the impact of that. But I did understand that later when I entered into my area of training for advertising. But I think it would have really helped fast track my learning as a designer if I had that further education on the psychology of design.
So we're thinking about colors, shapes, psychology, different forms of design. Taylor, does anything kind of come across similar to like that, or what was the journey like for you?
Yeah, I was actually gonna piggyback and say a lot of what you're saying, especially around the psychology element in everything that we do. And um, again, I am when I think about the word design, that means a couple things in my world. One being, as I said, I work at a product development firm, so a lot of it is the product design and the experience design. But then also for me, it's about designing experiences for people in collaboration and when we come together and make decisions. And so one of the things, Megan, that you said around the psychology and the kind of just understanding how people work a little bit. One thing that has become much more central to my work as a facilitator and a workshop designer is the cognitive biases that exist in the world. And when we start thinking of making decisions, especially when they are big, consequential decisions for business or organizations of any type, really, how almost no matter how rigorous our design process is, human bias still plays a role. So how can we disarm that, and how can we kind of neutralize that, and how can we design our experiences, our collaborations to minimize that as much as possible? So that's one thing that really resonated out of what you said. And then I think to add one thing, early on, I think I probably oversimplified things early on when I thought that designing something great was a great way to get somebody to believe in something or to use something. And over the course of my career, I've learned that there's so much more to that, and that co-creation, I've essentially learned the power of co-creation. And what I mean by that is, rather than designing for someone, designing with them instead, which of course helps us better understand their real needs as opposed to just hoping that we get it right. But B, it creates ownership, and it creates a kind of connection to what we're making with the person that we're designing with. And so I kind of have reframed it in part from designing for to designing with. And I think that's a really big kind of transition that has happened from the very beginning of my career until now.
That's really interesting, Taylor. I just wanted to riff off of that for a minute, because you're in the product design environment, and that's all about the experience. And so I would imagine that you do need to co-create with, because it's how that person interacts with a product, everything that goes with that particular experience. I would imagine, for me on the other end, the product already exists, and I need to come up with a design and communication solution that will actually connect psychologically to others, that
Right.
spreads the message about what that product is, what that function is. But sometimes that product speaks for itself, so I don't need to enter that space. But your space is before you get to, it's almost if you exist before I do, before that my desktop, you know what I mean? So that's really interesting. And I feel like that functionality of that co-creation is really important.
Definitely. And that makes me actually think about how, in a way, I can see how your job might be really difficult sometimes if the product that you're looking to connect people to maybe missed an opportunity to connect with those people, right? And so you have to kind of fill a gap in your work in creating that connection and communicating, whether it's communicating the value, communicating the experience, communicating the brand, communicating a feeling. I can see how, when that gap is particularly large, that your job is particularly hard.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what that's coming up for me is like how do you marry those two, right? Like, how do you go on this excursion that's going to be able to balance equal parts of that? And so what that's leading me to is kind of our next question, which is what has been like your biggest insight between that design and communication? Has it been that maybe that disconnect sometimes in experience? Has it been, conveying that message? Like what are the different implications and the insights that have kind of come about for you as in a design journey? Taylor, let's go with you this time.
Yeah, I think kind of as you segued, I think it is kind of a continuation, at least in part, of that thought for me, where it's really hard to just it goes back to kind of the core design / design thinking mindset of show, don't tell. Like we can talk all we want about our brilliant ideas and our brilliant products and our brilliant services. But if we don't really deliver the experience and help someone really feel it and feel something, what we're trying to communicate will be completely lost. And I think like that is, that's why we build prototypes, for instance, because if I tell you, hey, I have this great idea for this, this new Wi-Fi enabled coffee mug, and it kind of has this thing off the side that you can, if I'm describing it, we're all thinking different things. There are 12 people on this call. When I start describing it verbally, everybody's thinking about a different thing, because that's how our brains and our imaginations work, which in many cases is awesome. That's exactly what we want our minds to do, be creative. But if we're trying to align around a specific idea and to make a decision about what's next or how to test various things, I need to actually put something physical in front of you. And I wish I had a Wi-Fi enabled coffee mug around here that I could hold up to the video. But I put something in front of you, and that anchors us on a concrete thing that we are then talking about. It's an object. It's something we can react to. And, Megan can say, I love this. I wonder, can we move this, the handle up a little bit so the Wi-Fi button can be, or, whatever it is. It brings concreteness into the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think it early on, when I first kind of learned about prototypes and prototyping, I'm not sure I understood the depth of how important that point is. Because yes, it's important when we're prototyping a thing, but it's true for communicating ideas at any level. And so much of, especially in business, a lot of our, I know I've said our company is a product design firm, but we do a lot of strategy work too. So a lot of it is abstract. A lot of it is kind of more up there and harder to just create a physical form of, but how do you create a real tangible version of what you're talking about so that you can really communicate it and learn more about it together?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I can resonate with that. Obviously you're in the product design development world. I'm also tap into that as well. At the moment, we're working with a beautiful tea company, and we're co-designing a new tea product where you can put your tea, and it's got a bigger capacity, and it's a very Japanese inspired design. But I really connect with what you're saying, because I feel like in our design practice, we're graphic designers, animators, we come with a creative and strategic plan for what it is that we're communicating, how we're going to communicate, and what does that look like. We may have let's just say a design Bible, which is the brand's code, colors, language, logo, and their shape of their particular product. And they come to our studio because they're inspired by what they've seen with the art and the graphics and the animations in the marketplace that exists. But for us, sometimes it's not in the, I guess, getting lost in the weeds is my favorite expression, because you can get too stuck in strategy and planning and thinking and all the conversations around the table. Everyone has a different code of language and they visualize it a different way. So it's in the act of creation, do we actually come up with the design solution? So we need to apply our graphics and our designs and the colors and present it in front of the client and know that we're going to tick off certain boxes, but actually just be free to break the rules a little bit sometimes, because we get stuck on formulas. And in your case, you may come up with a formula for a product design. You know it's going to work with a medium, the size, the form, the functionality. But then sometimes if you're going to create something new and innovative, that's where you have to play in a space of breaking the rules a little bit and touching it and feeling it and seeing how you can change that. Same with my area. You visibly have to build it and design it and show it to then know how you can improve it. I'm always a believer in it's a blank white canvas. You don't know where you're going. So just start somewhere, apply your graphics and your communication, knowing you are, you're fully understandable about the brief and the strategy. Start with something, and then you can actually share it with the client to create that dialogue and that language. How do they respond to it? How is that functional? Is that going to answer the speed of communication that needs to be? For example, it's a social media campaign. Or is it too slow? Is it quick enough? Is it going to really connect with people? So build something, and then you can massage it and allow people to have a little bit of say into where it needs to go next. But I will say though, sometimes you can have too many voices in the room and too much is going to be expressed by all forms of, from the secretary to the designer to the some, you know, maybe your potential target market. You have to, as a designer, trust your instincts. Sometimes you have to lead the way where you know it's going to work, it's going to be functional, it's going to connect and communicate. And other people around the table may not believe it yet, but you have to know that you trust your instinct and your vision to get it over the line. And if you put too many chefs in the kitchen at the beginning of the making of the recipe, it's a disaster. So you need to keep on pushing it along, getting people's confidence around you and knowing that you can get it to a certain point that they can touch it and feel it and see it. And then you can evolve it to the next step. But it's always, for me, it's an evolution.
There is so much in everything you just said that I want to respond to and add on and yes, and it's so much resonates. I think especially that last point has come up actually on a few of the project teams that I've been on recently when we're working with clients. You know, the question that you, the comment you made about that it's kind of our job as the designers sometimes to just lead the way. And you know, especially as, you know, my kind of persona as the facilitator, I tend to be fairly deferential. Because facilitator, there's someone who asks questions and makes space for brilliant work to happen. And, you know, sometimes I do that work and sometimes I just make space for it. But there is sometimes the most important thing we can do is move forward and trust our vision and trust our, as you said, trust our instincts and trust our expertise and know that the path will emerge. And like the client or the, you know, who our partner might not see that yet, but it's our job to A, push forward, and B, help them feel safe along the way, help them know that it's okay along the way. And that happens in workshops, you know, innovation workshops, design thinking workshops all the time, especially with clients who are new to that way of doing things. About a third to halfway through, some folks will say, well, you know, are we going to get where we're trying to get? It's already noon and are we going to make it where we're trying to get? And it's just, absolutely, we're good. This is exactly where we need to be. Are you feeling uncomfortable? Perfect. That's exactly what you should be feeling. And that's okay. But I think that definitely resonates. And then the other thing that you said, that the blank canvas, and sometimes you just have to put a dot on it and go. I'm reminded of a quote I recently found by the author Jane Smiley, which said, "Every first draft is perfect because all a first draft has to do is exist." Mm-hmm. And I think it's, Megan, what you said is like, it hits that right on the nose of it doesn't matter what you do when you're getting started, but just doing something is what matters, because then you can iterate and build off of there. And Megan, I have a question for you, based kind of inspired by this question. I'm curious, based on your expertise, biggest insight between design and communication. I'm curious from your perspective, is it possible to have communication without design? And maybe vice versa, is it possible to have design without communication?
It's a great question. I'm going to have so much fun answering this. I think it really depends on what it is and the medium. So, but I feel, I'm working on a campaign at the moment, and there are aspects to that campaign, the way that I actually deliver it, that it's built up of a visual image, music, which is a soundbite, and language, which is copy, or animation, which is visual. So, and it's for quite a well-known client, Skagen from Denmark. It's a watch company. I'm working on a music score at the moment. So that, in a world of design, people don't visually see it, but they hear it. However, in the design and the creation of that music piece, there's still structure required. There's still a component of design that needs to happen with the creation of the music, but it's mainly instinctual. I guess that's really out of a box reference, because it's a little bit different to what we're normally talking with, and for my world, it's multiple different mediums. I truly believe that the first part of all of this is communication with the client, and ensuring that you're aligned with what the message is that you're trying to create to connect to your audience. My audience is always changing, the brands are changing. I work with Google, which is very digital, Apple for their video installations in store, or it could be for Fila, which is product design, and also an advertising campaign, which is mainly online through social media. And the actual rules of communication changes, and sometimes it's purely design. It's just aesthetic. It's not having to say anything. It's a feeling. It's not really trying to communicate anything. So sometimes there are instances that one does not belong to the other, but I do believe the majority of the time in my business with what I do, which is coming up with creative solutions for advertising campaigns, that is necessary. I will say, separately on my fine art business, working with galleries and museums, sometimes it's just an artwork on a wall, and that communication is up to the viewer to decide what that is. But it's not a deliverance. It's up to the interpretation. But sometimes the artist does not care about the communication. It's all about the feeling and the look. Completely different medium altogether.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, what that's also like bringing up for me a little bit in this conversation is the dynamic between, for example, when we're designing and communicating with a client in various different aspects, the concept of iteration, getting their feedback and constantly designing and validating and going through that process, versus permutations or giving out different design elements, or like, for example, workshop designs or logo pieces or something like that, and getting their feedback in that area to kind of find out which is the appropriate, I guess, method to go about it. So I'm curious from our guests here, like how that plays a role in the work that you do. Like, when do you kind of continue on the same path versus kind of deviating and communicating along the way?
I think it really being very project specific. There is obviously we have a brief from a client, and they're wanting to actually have some design solutions across a number of different mediums, whether it be an animation campaign for social media or a print campaign. And there's a very very defined brief of what we need to do and what we need to achieve. I think what's important is communicating with the client all along the way that sometimes that brief changes, and that means that our approach has to change. And getting back to what Taylor mentioned before is having that first draft. And if that first draft, which is a direction of the design and the communication, it creates and forms a blueprint. If that actually is a heads of agreement between the client and our designer and our creative team, it makes it much easier. However, there will be moments where the client is not feeling it. They don't feel like it actually resonates with their brand. Sometimes it's not, I'm not speaking to a creative team, I'm speaking to an accounts team or a marketing team that may change. And the original team is not the part of the decision making. And that also changes course with the communication. I think we don't always have the answers. I believe that the client knows their brand best and their brand communication best, and we lean on them. If they decide that what we're delivering to them is not aligned with the brand message and it doesn't quite fit, then we go back to the drawing board and we try something else. But I think it's really important, going back to that word communication, that we have a very clear brief that communicates what we're wanting to achieve, because it enables the client, which is the marketing team, and the creative team being myself and my team, that we always go back to that communication that says, well, this is what we've ticked and we've achieved. But if you don't feel like it's actually the design solution's not there, the creative solution's not there, what is it that we're missing? And we have an hour-long conversation as to what's missing. So there's a lot of communication and thinking and planning before we get to it, but the final solution for how we're going to approach it. But I think it is important that the process allows for evolution and for change, because sometimes it's in the act of designing something that you'll be, a problem may arrive and you have to come up with a solution for it. At the end of the day, it's all about being aligned and making sure that we're on the same page. We achieve the result that the client desires. And I will say sometimes the client doesn't know what they want until you deliver it in front of them and you guide them through that actual process.
Yeah, there's definitely some things that resonate in there with my experience as well. I think something that we say a lot at Delve is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Mm-hmm. And this idea of keeping your eye on kind of what the overall objective is, as opposed to, always solving for whatever the next thing is. There are a lot of ways to get to your North Star. And so keeping that North Star in mind, and keeping the why and the what the same, but changing the how. And I guess sometimes changing the what also, but really keeping the why the same. Why are we doing this? Why does this exist? Why are we spending time on this? So I think that really resonates. I think something Megan called out too is that, when teams change, there's the human element in all of this, right? There's, no matter how perfect we feel sometimes our solutions might be, if there's a change in who is receiving those solutions, or what the stakeholder cares about, or what pressure they're feeling inside their company or from the market or various other places, just really understanding who the real stakeholders are, who the decision makers are, who the influencers are, and being able to really understand them. So even if it's not communicating about the design itself, it's really communicating with them to understand what is driving them, getting on the same page about what will change the focus or the situation or the objective for them. Sometimes I've written a little bit about like resilience thinking, And whereas, we might kind of solve a problem and say, okay, cool. The normal approach might just be to solve that problem. The resilience approach is, how relevant will this solution be as the problem space evolves or as the circumstances around it change? And I think that is a really important thing to get aligned with stakeholders on. So this is the project that we're on. This is the problem that we're solving. What could change that? And what would that lead to? What changes would that lead to? So I think that's another element that I think kind of comes at the word communication in a couple different ways. One being the thing that we're designing or the experience that we're designing specifically. And another is, how are we talking to different stakeholders and how are we making sure that we're on the same page about what really matters?
I think, Taylor, like you just touched on a big point about like aligning with the stakeholders and the target audience, right? And I want to bring in one of the questions that we have from the chat from Angie, and she's asking, she's like, how, if you're dealing with people that aren't familiar with design thinking, or you're a small team that just wants to crank out the work, how do you help them understand and communicate the value of the process of design? So I'm wondering if you guys can elaborate and help them.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a quick thought, because this is something that I grapple with a lot, honestly. And before joining Delve, I ran my own small firm of basically just running design thinking workshops and innovation workshops and whatnot. And one of the hardest things for me to figure out was how to sell it, because not everybody understood it. Not everybody understood the value of this type of work. Not everyone had experienced it. And so, Angie, what you bring up was kind of my life for 2 years, trying to figure out, okay, how do I communicate the value of this? So that, for that, it was so that I can sell it, and so that I can share this experience with more people. And my strategy became, the thing that I realized was, once I actually delivered an experience, whether it was a 90-minute kind of bite-sized experience or a multi-day workshop, once they actually experienced it, everything changed. And they said, how do we do this all the time? How do we do more of this? Can we talk about doing another one of these really soon? And so it really, for me, it comes down to, how can you give them an experience as a means of communicating the value, as opposed to just saying it. Again, it goes back to show, don't tell. And I don't want that to sound like an oversimplification, because, getting people to sign up for a day-long workshop is hard, but how can you give as small of an experience as possible, even if it's just you get up to a whiteboard and sketch out what the idea that you're talking about, instead of sitting at the table and talking about it with words. So how can you kind of provide as simple of an experience as possible, or what's the simplest, but also what's the biggest version that you can really fit into their work or their life or their day-to-day, to communicate that through experience as opposed to through words. That's probably the biggest thing that I have learned, and kind of my goal is deliver the experience in a small enough way where they can kind of get it and say, ooh, I want a little more of that. I want a little more of that. And then you kind of keep going from there. Megan, I'm curious to hear your thoughts too.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's very industry specific as to how we answer this question. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that this has been brought up, because just today, in fact, I'm working with a client, and they're brand new to the marketing team, and their job within this company, working with the brand and their communications, is to brief in the actual job. And they're very familiar with more of the asset side, but they're not familiar with the technical side. And literally, it's all about that language again. So it's this person was brand new. She'd never done this before. And I realized halfway through the conversation, she had no idea what it is that she needed to communicate. Specifics on technicalities of social media campaigns and formats and specs and what that looks like. This is it was very challenging, but a good moment, because I realized that I wasn't able to get the information from her succinctly and quickly. I had to come up with a solution straight away because I'm on a deadline. And so I had to teach her and show her as a guide of what it is that we're trying to communicate, what the different formats mean, and what that impact and what that result will be. So that in the end, I was able to get the information from her by training her and giving her a industry example. So then I could get the solution that I needed, the information I needed to then continue to develop. I mean, that's just one example, but that's very relevant for my industry, which is quite different to Taylor's. But generally, when I'm speaking to designers or clients, if they're not familiar with it, they don't know about it, you need to give them a real world reference, which is in context of what you're actually doing, showing them a design that's out there in the marketplace, which is, this is an example of what we're trying to achieve, because it has XYZ values that apply to it. And it's almost that aha moment, because they've seen it, they're like, oh, okay, I get it now, because they can relate to it. And relating and understanding and education and knowledge, it all goes back to that word, communication and design. And I would say 50% of my job in my design studio in New York City is communication. And then the rest of it is the design solution. And without that succinct communication and getting people to relate and understand and engage them and make them feel like they're a part of the process as well. Because when someone's a part of that process on the client side, it makes them feel like they've contributed some value to it and they're invested. And together, as we've brought up this word before, Taylor mentioned, which is, you're collaborating, you're actually bringing them on board to be a part of that process. And the more you do that with a client or a designer, getting them to be fully invested, they're able to learn and come up with solutions and also understand the final result, because they're a part of that decision making along the way.
Yeah, I think I want to kind of add a vote also to what you said about just kind of showing the outcome and demonstrating a case study. Talk about what happens when you do work this way, when whether it's whatever type of design it is, or whatever it's really any change that you're trying to make to how people do things or how people work together. If you can demonstrate a positive output, if you can demonstrate a net positive in either, when you tried something small, this was the output, so let's try something a little bit bigger next time, or a case study from outside your organization with some, connecting the dots on how you see it succeeding within your organization. And I think it can be, like I said, it can be really small, like, in my world, it can be as simple as, if you have a 60-minute kind of meeting once a week with a design team, what's one small thing you can do differently that kind of changes up the routine, where, if you typically start the meeting with 20 minutes of brainstorming around whatever topic you're meeting to tackle, maybe start with 10 minutes of individual heads down reflection and brainstorming time, and then transition into 10 minutes of team time. And what you're doing there is just kind of bringing intention to how you're designing that experience together and that meeting. And when you start doing that, people start noticing well, that was a different way to do things. And that felt really good. And that got us somewhere I didn't know we could get in just 1 hour. So that's, I think, something that can be really valuable too. And then the coach in me, putting the coach hat on, I also like, sometimes it's, meeting it head on, and just, if there's somebody who's really skeptical, just talking to them about it. Just saying, hey, I'm really excited about this new way of doing things. It seems like you have some hesitation. Can you help me understand where that comes from? And just kind of checking in and talking as two humans who are both probably have generally the same goals. So what can you do to just have an honest conversation? Because there might be something that you totally don't know about that's in that person's way, or, they tried it at a past company and it totally didn't work. And, you can kind of create a new world for them within the new company that you're both into. So that's kind of the last thought that I would share on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even get to introduce this third point because you guys kind of answered it on the fly. So it was wonderful. So just to kind of recap, I mean, like, as far as evolving, we're talking about, aligning on a vision together, as soon as possible through visuals. So that way people can kind of collaborate. We also talked about showing what's out there in the world and observing some case studies to bring people along and bring them on board. We talked about making some small tweaks and incorporating some feedback loops so people can be flexible about how they're adding information into it. And also, adding a little bit of a coaching hat too, to kind of maybe unblock the work, or unblock maybe some cognitive biases that people may have, or some preconceived notions about how things are supposed to go, and kind of navigating that along. So I know we're running actually a little bit close for time here, but I wanted to open up for a quick Q&A in case anybody had any other unresolved questions they want to add or ask our lovely panelists. No? All right. Well, thank you guys so much on behalf of me. I think Luna might have a few closing remarks for us.
I do. Oh my God. I mean, I'm always inspired. I've known Megan for 5 years, so I knew I would be inspired again. But Taylor, thank you so much for also bringing the perspective of design thinking. I'm so passionate about that theme as well. I love to see the correlation with that and communication. I do believe it's key for any kind of work, really. I would like to just wrap up, reminding you guys that in 8 days we start the course. Conversations such as this one will definitely be held during our workshops and master classes. These fire sessions are about to be over in the beginning of next week, but the Fire Sessions for Design Leadership program is an ongoing project. So as soon as we have the season started, we'll probably be starting to plan the next sessions. I would love to offer a discount code for those who are here today. You're welcome to scan the QR code or email me. If not for this reason, any other reason about the program, or if you want to know more about Echoes or myself, this is my email address. You can also find me with that first and last name on LinkedIn. And I'd like to offer you a gift, which is the ebook. It's a free ebook about design leadership with perspectives of our previous season masterclass speakers. We have a new one that we'll be launching. Just to have a spoiler here, we are launching on Monday or Tuesday our second ebook. So make sure to download this one so you will be updated with the second version once we download it, once we upload it next week. And I'd like to thank everyone. Mike, thank you so much. All the fire sessions that we had together were quite inspiring. I appreciate Megan and Taylor for being here today, for trusting us. And I'll see you guys very soon during Design Leadership Program.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.